very good morning to madams. Today we are going to present a group project report which the title is Vaccination for STID3014 Database System and Information Retrieval Group B. And we are from Group 1. The group members are Yo Kenny 271517, Wong Chun Ho 270998, Becky Hong 271513, and also Nur Fatih Nabila 262842. Since the outbreak of the coronavirus, the health and economic growth in our country suffer a huge blow from it. But as we say, all suffering will have their reward at the end. At the beginning of the year 2021, vaccine has successfully invented and started to use in our country. So to control the vaccine, we have developed a vaccine information control system. There will be three main parts inside our vaccine information control system, which are supplier, logistic, and vaccination center. Basic information such as company name, company address, company email, company contact number will be one of the attributes for supplier and logistic company, whereas for the vaccination center, each state have their own vaccination center, and under the vaccination center, there will be staff to help out the registration process. There will be 7 entities inside our ERD diagram, which are vaccination center, staff, registration, citizen, vaccine information, and under vaccine information, there will be 2 subclasses, which are supplier information and also the logistic company. For vaccination center, there will be 2 attributes, which are state and WAC contact number, followed by entity staff, which have the attribute of staff ID, which is the primary key, staff name, staff contact number, and staff email. And for the entity registration, the attribute of entity registration is registration number, which is primary key, registration date, vaccination venue, and also status update. So followed by entity citizen, which have the attribute of citizen ID, which is the primary key, citizen name, and also citizen contact number. The attribute for entity vaccine information will be vaccine ID, which is the primary key, vaccine name, and also the amount. And the attribute for entity supply information have supply ID, primary key, sub-company name, sub-contact number, sub-company address, and also sub-email. For the entity logistic company, the attribute are log company ID, which is the primary key, log company name, log contact number, tracking number, and also delivery status. For the relationship part in the ERD diagram, it can show that one vaccination center have many staff, and one staff will be assigned to many registration tasks. And besides staff, one vaccination center also have many vaccine information, which include supplier information and logistic company. And one citizen can only apply for one registration.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Nur Fatih Nabila binti Ismail. My matrix number is 262842. Okay, now I will start with relational model. Based on the EER diagram, we have 2 assumptions. Assumption number 1 is citizen that has registered for the vaccination can update or change their status name in the registration process. And then assumption number 2 is each vaccination center in different state have their own staff. Okay, now for relational model, number 1 is staff. In the bracket, we have staff ID, which is the primary key for staff, and then we have the attribute for staff, which is staff name, staff contact number, and staff email. The foreign key for staff is state. And then move to number 2. Number 2 is registration. In the bracket, we have registration number, which is the primary key for registration, and then the attribute for this is registration date, vaccination date, vaccination venue, and status update. The foreign key for registration is staff ID. And then move to number 3. Number 3 is citizen. In the bracket, we have citizen ID, which is the primary key, and the attribute for this is citizen name, citizen contact number, and the foreign key for citizens is registration number. Number 4 is supplier information and logistic information. The attribute for this is vaccine name, amount, supplier ID, sub-company name, sub-contact number, sub-company address, sub-email, log company ID, log company name, log contact number, tracking number, and the last one is delivery status. The primary key for supplier information and logistic information is vaccine ID. And then move to the last one, which is number 5. Number 5 is vaccination center and vaccine information. The attribute for this is vaccine name and vaccine contact number. For vaccination center and vaccine information have two primary key. Number 1 is state and number 2 is vaccine ID. The foreign key for vaccination center and vaccination information also have two. The number 1 is state and number 2 is vaccine ID.
So right now I'm going to explain about the normalization. In the normal form, the vaccination system that involves 6 tables, which is citizen, registrations, staff, vaccine, supplier, and logistic. So come to the first normal form, we will be identify the key. So registration number and vaccine ID, they will be our key. So come to second normal form, it will be eliminated the repeated group, which is the registrations and vaccine, because they involve partial dependency and transitive dependency. So in the third normal form, it will be eliminate and declare the transitive dependency, which is in registration, there will be a staff and citizen. In vaccine, it will be a supplier and logistic. That's all from me. Thank you.
For my part, I'm going to present about the table relation. And as you can see, there are a total of 7 tables here, and the vaccination system being the main table for this part. In vaccination system, the table contains supplier ID, lot company, vaccine ID, staff ID, registration number, and citizen ID, which plays as the primary key for all the other tables. And this table will link to all the other tables also. The first one, for supplier ID, it links to the supplier table. And the second one, lot company, will link to the logistic table. Vaccine ID will link to the vaccine table, and it contains state, supplier ID, and lot company ID as the foreign key. Staff ID will connect to the staff table, which contains state as the foreign key. Registration number will link to the registration table, which contains staff ID as the foreign key. And last but not least, the citizen ID will link to the citizen table, which contains registration number as the foreign key. And that's all for my part.